Yeah, are we ready to go, Lisa?
I think we are. If you'd like to kick things off, and then I'll take it from there.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm John Hall, CABA Research Director, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar presentation by IHS IMS Research on the Monetization Modeling of Connected Homes 2013 Landmark Research. Excuse me. The overall purpose of this collaborative landmark research is to greatly improve the understanding and development of effective connected home solution monetization, because there's a number of models out there. And to understand the models optimize revenue potential, provide operational efficiencies through the value chain, and are adaptable and can be more structured for use throughout the ecosystem. The study, just to give you a little bit of background, study RFP was issued to several research consultancies in a competitive bidding process, as with previous landmark research. And the selection of IHS IMS Research was made by the project steering committee, RFP team. It was made up of 6 participants, and we'd like to thank them for their participation and valuable input in selecting IHS IMS Research. So now we'd like to thank the team from IHS IMS Research for putting together today's presentation. And now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Lisa Arrowsmith, Associate Director, Connectivity for IHS IMS Research. Lisa?
Thanks, John. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where everybody's calling in from. Welcome to IHS's technical proposal for the monetization modeling of the Connected Homes project. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to just start with a brief introduction to IHS. So who is IHS? How do we fit into this connected home ecosystem, and what is our experience with this area? Before moving on to cover our proposed study. So we'll be looking at the overview, the methodology, what the specific deliverables are, how long it's actually going to take us, and who's going to be working on it. We'll then have a brief introduction to the Project Steering Committee, which John Hall will introduce. And then at the end, there will be hopefully plenty of time left for a question and answer session, just to cover any kind of questions you might have about the study as we're going through. So first of all, who is IHS? Some of you may already be familiar with us, but those of you that aren't, we are more than 6,500 people working across 30 different countries. And the shared goal that we all have in common is that we're all working together to help our customers to drive the critical processes and to help them with making the high-impact decisions that they're faced with every day with the speed and confidence needed. So this includes a variety of different business units, from energy and power right the way through to country and industry analysis. We have additional further expertise across supply chain analysis, you'll see pricing analysis, and quite a range of other key functions. So the business unit that I'm part of and that this bid is coming out of is IHS's Electronics and Media Division. So some of you may be familiar with some of the legacy brands that you'll see below. The IHS Electronics and Media Division combines the expertise across these different legacy brands, really leading to expansive research coverage right the way from silicon to subscriber. So this will include quite a number of familiar names, whether it's iSupply, DisplayBank, Screen Digest, or IMS Research. So IHS has got a range of different syndicated research across this connected home market. And as part of that, we've got quite a broad range of expertise related to the different areas. So we have research on connected homes themselves, but in addition to that, as you can see from this list here, we've got extensive coverage across some of the areas which fit quite nicely into the connected home. So just as an example, we've got things such as home automation equipment research, metering and smart grid research, right the way through to physical security equipment, access control, alarm monitoring, telecommunications and operator strategy, and right the way really across the value chain. So specific to our actual connected home research, we do regularly conduct a range of both consumer surveys and market analysis and sizing studies. So just to give you a brief overview of some of our previous studies, one of the ones that we're currently working on at the moment is a smart home consumer survey. So we've been doing these for a number of years, predominantly covering the US and the UK. But we think this is quite an interesting study because we're actually now expanding that out to cover Brazil, Germany, and China as well. So one of our analysts, who's on the line today actually, is currently in the process of analysing a lot of the raw data that's coming in from the study. So just starting to have a look at that now and certainly seeing some interesting things across the different countries. So this is just an example of some of the previous research that we've done in this area and the way that we've presented this research in the past. So just an example from our UK and US consumer survey study, looking at aspects such as which companies are most suited to provided smart home or remote home management services and consumer willingness to pay extra for certain functions. We also offer a range of connected home market sizing studies. So these would include some very sort of deep dive focused studies, such as the one that you see on the bottom of that slide there, smart home energy management systems. So what we've done within that study is we have really taken a deep dive into the smart home energy management systems market by looking at specifically across 26 different countries and sub-regions, and really analysing the deployment of smart metering in each of the different countries and the impact that that will have on the market for connected devices, whether that's smart thermostats, load control switches, etc. And then additionally, we have broader studies, such as a smart home, where we open up the market rather than just looking specifically at, say, demand response hands. We look at all a range of different types of automation smart home systems, covering the high-end traditional systems, the managed service or the cloud-based home control services, right the way across to unmanaged mainstream DIY systems, and of course the demand response piece as well. So again, just an example of how we typically would present that kind of data. And as you can see, we'll have different graphs that will show units shipped and then also segment by application type, system type, node counts, prices, revenues, etc. So we also do have quite a broad range of application-specific studies. So just at a top level, this will include quite deep dive research looking at lighting systems, HVAC controls, consumer health monitoring. And as you can see, these would typically be market sizing studies where we'd be able to actually look into a single application within a range of different environments, right down to the different types of devices used, often on a country-specific level, to really help us to understand the factors impacting the uptake of a specific function. So additionally, that would include other things such as our broadband and digital home market tracker, a new study looking into remote monitoring services, and that also includes PERS, personal emergency response services, which I think we're seeing increasingly talked about, and then also mobile operator business models. So just some further examples of how we would typically present our information in these connected home studies, whether it's market sizing by region or market sizing by residential area. So while you look at those, I'm just going to put everybody on mute. And then if anybody wants to ask any questions midway through, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll leave questions to the end.
To unmute your line, press *6 or #6.
So we also have quite extensive research into the impact of the connected home on a broad range of different ecosystem players. We think it's really important not just to look at the impact that the different players are having on this market, but also on the impact of the emergence of the different market trends are having on the individual players, recognizing that it's very much a two-way street. So in that context, just as an example here, we've got a series of studies that look at cellular M2M and it's the role of operators within the connected home, whether it's looking specifically into home security and automation, right the way through to looking at a broader range of value-added services and the connectivity services that we see emerging within that area. So that's just an example of some of our connected home and related researches. But additionally, in terms of our relevant consulting experience, we've got a very strong track record of working with a range of different clients to help us to identify strategic growth options by performing quite a broad range of key services. So as you can see on the slide, that ranges from industry and economic market forecasting, mergers and acquisition strategies and due diligence, regulatory compliance and analysis, economic impact analysis, and business analytics and business strategy development. So we've got a broad range of different case studies of companies that we've worked with in the past, but just to select two case studies just to contrast the range of different services that we provide. I've got two just to highlight to you today. So the first of these is a case study of work we did with a leading consumer goods supplier. And the role of this was to help them assess their entry into the consumer health monitoring market. This consisted of two separate research processes, one of them being a primary research process, which included the consumer survey covering the UK, Germany, California, and Texas. And the aim of that was to assess consumer attitudes and demands with respect to health monitoring. Additionally, we included a series of secondary research processes to result in a series of case studies across the telehealth and consumer health monitoring value chain. So what this enabled our client to do was it enabled our client to formulate a go-to-market strategy which was actually based on actionable data-driven consumer insight. And in doing so, we identified the potential market opportunities and also a range of possible strategic partnerships. So this is just an example of a case study we did which had that consumer survey and secondary research methodology included. The second case study that I wanted to highlight today, if whoever just joined the call could mute their line, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So the second one I wanted to highlight today was a case study where we looked at the market for energy management in industrial processes. And that was for a leading provider of factory and process automation solutions. So this consisted of a series of market sizing and sales forecasts for the adoption of energy management systems, specifically in industrial processes. So as well as the market sizing information, the study also outlined the key aspects of the go-to-market strategy for this company. So as you can see, that sort of includes both the market sizing and go-to-market strategy on one end, and then also the consumer side on the other end. So I provided those case studies just to demonstrate the depth and breadth of our custom research and consultancy experience. But we do certainly have many more which are available if anybody would like to sort of peruse the entire slide deck there. So now moving on to the key focus of our call today. So the monetization modeling of the connected home study. IHS has put together a project outline which will provide an understanding of the connected home market. And that's really from vendor to end user. And we're aiming to categorize the value chain across the different products and services within the connected home market to really allow further clarity of revenue generation, positioning, and real value creation in the connected home market. So in order to do this, we are proposing two concurrent research processes. The first of them is a series of more than 20 primary research interviews across the connected home ecosystem. So that will include service providers, retailers, contracted installation companies, device suppliers themselves, and many others. And that has the goal of actually supplementing existing research that we've got from a very recent study which included primary interviews with over 40 connected home ecosystem players. So it builds on the existing knowledge base that we have from our very recent study into this area. Additionally, the second part of the research process is we propose to undertake a consumer survey which will cover 1,000 North American respondents. And this will really be designed to determine how the different groups will define value in the connected home. So as mentioned, this is an area where we've got extensive experience and expertise, having undertaken quite a few connected home consumer surveys over the past 5 years or so, part of both syndicated and custom research studies. So I will go into these two project stages in a little bit more depth in a moment, but just so that we can clarify the project scope, I think it's important to sort of establish that at this stage. So in terms of the scope of the project, we plan to cover all of the main facets of the connected home market. So that includes coverage of a range of different system types. So it's not just the whole home or the modular solutions or the closed or the managed systems, or just looking at DIY or just looking at professional installed systems. It's really trying to look across the broad range of different system types. And in doing so, we'll cover a range of different device types. So the key applications set to be covered range from the HVAC controls, home monitoring devices, lighting controls, other home automation solutions, and consumer health monitoring. Now, I think what's really important to kind of note here that's maybe not captured in this slide is that, pretty importantly, we're including this as a whole system type as well. So we're not just planning to look at these applications in silos. We're also aiming to look at how the systems can work together as a whole. And I think that that's something that's often not captured when we think of the smart home. It's very easy to kind of start to get siloed with the approaches that we see from different companies focusing on a specific system type or a specific device type. So we recognize that there's a key range of stakeholders within this connected home market. And importantly, we're not only concentrating on the traditional players here, but also looking at the emerging companies which are starting to become more and more part of the ecosystem. We have decided for the purposes of this report to limit the geographic scope to North America. So moving on to the proposed research process and methodology, just a bit of a summary of our approach. So phase one of the research process, starts with a kick-off meeting between us and the project steering committee, and includes also the primary research scope and contact list development. So as part of that first kick-off meeting, what we will do is we will meet with the steering committee members and just make sure that the key parameters of our study is really much aligned to what they need from this area. Ensure that our study really will maximize the value which is provided in our analysis and our strategic recommendations. So during the kick-off meeting, IHS will meet with the project steering committee team to agree areas such as, who are the key members of the connected home ecosystem that we plan to focus on. And so, there would be the different service providers, device suppliers, right the way through to operators, platform providers, security organizations, etc. So who are the key types of companies to include, and what are the main topics that we need to be covering in the primary interview process? After the kick-off meeting, IHS will go away and we will develop 3 different areas. So one of them will be an end-user survey questionnaire that will be used in phase 2 of the research process. So that will include all the different areas, asking about the different things that we need to understand about the connected home, and then also include a range of key consumer demographic questions so that we can allow for full segmentations of preferences, adoptions, or attitudes, based on criteria such as age, income level, technology adoption, attitude to the environment, decision-making ability, etc. We will also develop a discussion guide for each segment of the connected home industry participants. So that will be used in the interview process just to ensure we've got consistency across the discussions. And that will cover all the key aspects such as current monetization practices, go-to-market strategies, the benefits and successes of those strategies, as well as obviously importantly the challenges or the pain points, and then any other key issues. And we'll use secondary research to really aid the design of that discussion guide. And then thirdly, we'll also design the contact list of companies in each of the agreed industry participant segments. So that will be compiled from our existing internal database, as well as we'll seek new contacts in relevant industry segments if required. So I suppose the thing to point out there is that once we've gone away and we've put together this discussion guide and the end-user survey questionnaire, what we're happy to do at that point in time is to actually send that over to the project steering committee and just make sure that that covers all of the specific areas that are planned to be covered by each company. So we recognize that with this type of study, it's quite feasible that the project steering committee can consist of quite a broad range of different companies across the connected home ecosystem. So we're happy to follow kind of an interactive approach where we'll put together our recommended research plan with respect to the end user survey and the discussion guide. and then send that over just to make sure that we are really capturing the key points for each of the companies involved. So it can either be as interactive or as non-interactive as people like, so we're happy equally just to go away and to work based on our opinions of what the key areas are to cover. So phase 2 of the research process, that will be the actual primary research phase itself. So that will consist of the primary interviews with the industry participants and also the consumer survey. So I will cover those in more depth in the next slide. Moving on to phase 3 of the project. Phase 3 of the project will be the report development and the delivery. So in that context, there's quite a broad range of different areas that we plan to look at. So following the completion of the end user or the consumer survey, and then also the industry participant interviews, those two parts of phase 2, we'll use the research feedback to interpret and evaluate the trends and developments within the connected home, connected device, related markets. And our in-house analysts actually already have the breadth of vertical markets and industry specialism required to support our research activities, because we do have teams that cover across the different areas that I've listed on the slide previously. So not only dedicated connected home analysts, but also those looking specifically at, say, M2M and operator strategy, home security and access control, right the way through across the different parts of the system. So the process of conducting the primary interviews with the key connected home industry participants, so that would be the device suppliers, etc., through to the service providers, operators, platform providers, etc. That will really enable us to understand the current monetization strategies that are adopted by companies within the connected home value chain today, and that will include the key benefits and challenges that are inherent to each approach. What we'll do is we'll then take that information and map that against the findings from the consumer survey. And what that will do is that will allow alignment between the current monetization strategies that we see with existing connected home offerings and the actual demands of the end user. So that will enable us to identify the best practice monetization strategies and also potentially any new areas that aren't currently served by today's connected home offerings. The new research will be supplemented with what we have in-house already. So we already have an extensive range of research in-house as part of our ongoing research into the connected home market. So looking further at phase 2 of the research, as you can see there, it consists of two main parts. We've got 2A, the end user or consumer survey, and 2B, which is the industry participant interviews. So phase 2A, the objective of phase 2A will be to generate sufficient raw data to analyse what actually constitutes as value to the different consumer groups. Which key devices and which features and which services can really enable a stronger value proposition. Is it cloud monitoring? Is it extended warranties, tech support? How are different services actually valued by potential end users? We will do that by surveying 1,000 consumers specifically in North America and asking a wide range of topics, covering the desirability of different device types right the way through to attitudes to different suppliers. So we can build the consumer survey, which will use techniques which will actually allow us to assess consumer willingness to pay for the different features as well. And we can do that in a way that can be more effective than just direct questioning on that area. As mentioned, we're happy to share the questionnaire with the project steering committee prior to the survey launch, just to ensure agreement of the survey scope and to ensure that we're really maximising value for each individual party involved. What we can also do, if of interest, is that we can enable actual product examples to be built into the survey. And that will help us when we look to offer independent consumer feedback on real-life examples of certain products, features and services, and can really tie that into the different monetization models that we see today. So further insight into the state of the connected home market. And as mentioned, that will really cover right the way through from device suppliers to service providers and all the companies that are also potentially entering this market in between. So we'll use that to really assess areas such as what types of companies are currently involved in the connected home market, how is it likely to change in the future, how do the activities of the traditional connected home guys differ from the new market entrants from other industries? For example, how will companies such as M2M operators or cable operators impact this market? Which routes to market business models or monetization strategies have been the most successful? Why do we think that is? How do we expect that to develop in the future? And how are the companies creating value at each different stage of the ecosystem? Look at what the major challenges and opportunities are at each stage of the value chain. Really recognizing that with a multi-client study with companies that really do reach from different areas, it's important to look at each of the different value chain areas and to really provide insight into the challenges and opportunities present at each. So as I mentioned, we've already got a recent study where we interviewed over 40 primary research companies, or performed primary research interviews for over 40 connected home companies. And so we'll use this process to really supplement our current in-house market knowledge in this area. We will be responsible for generating both the contact list for the consumer survey and the industry research programs as well. So now moving on and looking at the key deliverables in more depth. So we plan to present a detailed summary of the different key participants in the connected home ecosystem. And this ranges from all the different types of companies that we mentioned before, whether they're service providers, such as platform providers, telcos, security providers, operators, etc., through to retailers, contractors, installation companies, and device suppliers themselves. Within this, we aim to analyze not only the traditional companies, but also the new companies entering the market. And we'll do this by creating a current value chain matrix. We'll look at this matrix with respect to areas such as products, pricing, revenue streams, and we plan to really actually look at how this is set to change and evolve in the future. So we'll provide an overview of the ecosystem right the way across the different application markets, whether it's energy, entertainment, health, or home monitoring. As I mentioned, it will include the assessment of challenges and opportunities at each stage of the ecosystem. As well as to focus on a specific part of the ecosystem, we plan to really enable us to actually provide insight at each important area across the ecosystem. And we'll actually identify the different areas to be covered in conjunction with the project steering members. We'll look at how the different routes to market and business models will evolve. So this includes summarizing not only what we see in the market today, but also looking at how the presence of new entrants will impact this kind of market, how we expect that to evolve in the future. And also look at how a company can decide which type of business model might be most appropriate for what they're planning to do in this market. We'll look at this across different company types, key segments, and also the offerings. And throughout that section and the section before, we'll also present a series of case studies or profiles, which will be used to demonstrate examples of the different routes to market that we see, the different business models, examples of new market entrants, or any other interesting things that we find and want to highlight in those areas. So then coming on to identification of end-user value propositions. So this is very heavily based on phase 2A of the research, which, as you remember, is the consumer survey. And we'll really use findings and analyze the raw data in that area to determine, fundamentally, how does a user define value in this area? What's considered key to them when they're making an assessment or a judgment on this type of product? Is this something that's even on their radar? And what types of areas, when we introduce them to new functions, do they find appealing or not appealing? We'll also look at the range of different business models. So we might look, as an example, in the managed home area, we might look at the higher upfront device package cost versus ongoing subscription fees, etc. To look at some of the common business models that we see and assess consumer attitudes towards these different models. What we aim to do here is we aim to help vendors to be able to decide when they're developing new connected home offerings, what types of features should be included in these and how can they really go to market across the different segments that we cover. So importantly, we will be segmenting this raw data out by the different consumer demographics. So we'll cover just the traditional ones like age, income level, gender, but we also include a series of other questions which help us to formulate sort of a scoring system for the respondents across areas such as technology adoption, attitude to the environment, their ability to actually make a decision on the purchase of these types of systems and other areas. So within this, we plan to look at the different types of systems, and this aligns quite closely to the system types that you see covered in the scope slide, which I presented a few moments ago. So we'll look right the way across self-install to DIY systems. We'll look at the different factors which impact a consumer's familiarity or ability to set up this type of system, or to try and set up this type of system. And we'll look at whether, to what extent a modular approach is preferred within these different connected home deployments. We'll also look heavily into the route to market. So are there specific types of companies they're most comfortable purchasing different types of systems from? Is there certain brands that they're most looked towards or most comfortable trusting to install a certain type of system or to provide a system? And is there, consumer awareness of these brands and companies today? As mentioned, we think business models is a very important area to cover. Obviously, within the context or scope of this research, we will be examining consumer attitudes to the different monetization platforms and to the different sort of business models that we see today. So what we can also do is we can use this end-user survey to compare the current pricing offers by systems on the market today against perceived customer value as well. So finally, we'll conclude by really aligning the findings across the two research platforms, across both the consumer survey and the primary research interviews. And in doing so, that will enable us to not only identify the difficulties and opportunities which are emerging as the connected home landscape changes, but also use the consumer attitudes and consumer data to actually enable data-driven decision-making for vendors by looking at what consumers need and how they define value in this market today. We'll look at how feasible it will be for organizations to implement new monetization models based on what our findings are in the end-user survey, and also really define the critical success factors that we see through the value chain and end users, helping to identify the opportunities for any underserved segments and new opportunities for value creation based on these findings. What this will do is this will assist vendors in optimizing their market strategies. It will identify potential strategic alliances based on ecosystem characteristics and also end-user requirements. I think what's very important to note about this is probably the final bullet point, is that we do plan to provide strategic recommendations to each of the market segments and each type of ecosystem player, and to really enable us to guide vendors through new business model development, irrespective of where they are within the ecosystem or within the value chain for the emerging connected home market. So when we look at this in terms of project timeline, we see this being a 16-week project from the kickoff meeting. And as you can see within that slide there, just to highlight some of the key points, so we'll obviously start off with the project kickoff, contact list development and working on the survey, questionnaire and interview discussion topics, before launching into a quite extensive primary research phase for analysing the results, both of our primary research into the ecosystem players and also the consumer survey, for preparing the final report and delivering the report following week 16. We do plan to offer update calls through this process as well, just to let the project steering committee members know how the project is developing and how we're going through the process. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of who you can expect to see through this project. So starting with the people who are actually on the call today, that's me. So I joined IMS Research back 5 years ago and then joined IHS through our acquisition last March. I manage our connected home research, which includes quite a broad range of studies that we mentioned earlier today, so certain consumer surveys as well as many of the market sizing studies. And this includes both the syndicated side of the market and also a range of custom projects related to the connected home. Then we've got Bill Lessier. So Bill joined IHS last year in 2012, bringing quite an extensive experience within the telecoms and IT industry, having been a consultant there for over 13 years. And currently Bill is in a research and advisory role within our telecoms media technology group. Another Bill, we've got Bill Morelli. So Bill heads up our M2M and connected devices group. And so this covers a range of the different cellular M2M communications. And he's also the primary analyst responsible for examining our Internet connected devices or Internet of Things research. Sam Ciro, unfortunately couldn't be on the call today, but Sam has got an extensive research background. Prior to joining IHS, he was Director of AVI's research and their end-to-end connectivity practice, and so he's got a broad range of experience across cellular end-to-end connectivity and software platforms. We have Robert Braverman, Senior Director of Commercial Product Management at IHS. So Robert is a 25-year veteran in high technology and joined the company through iSupply, who were also acquired by IHS a few years ago, and he's worked at iSupply since 2001. We've got Jonas Westland, who is our Director of Custom Research and Consulting, with over 15 years of research and consulting experience. Scott Hazelton, Director of our Construction Industrial Consulting, and has a range of different expertise across different platforms which are key to the connected home market, such as certain building materials, typical to HVAC systems. Will Rhodes, who is a Senior Market Analyst who specialises in building technologies and is currently completing a lot of our HVAC research for the company. And finally, Josh Bilter, Senior Analyst with Bill Morelli's M2M Connected Devices Group, who focuses on a range of different cellular end-to-end communications and ICT areas. So with that, and before we hand over to questions, I will pass you back to John Hall, who will be able to give you an introduction to the steering committee sponsors. John.
Instrumental in the vendor selection process and for helping to shape the study as we went along in developing the scope and the objectives and the needs of the research. So currently our steering committee consists of IBM, Pella Corporation, Qualcomm Incorporated, Schneider Electric, and Verizon. And I know that's...
Hello?
Hi. I can hear you now. Yeah.
Great.
Is this Jeff?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Really. We'd like to ask some of the study sponsors if they could just briefly state what benefit they see as being derived from this project for your organization.
Absolutely. Well, we have identified a few items that we'd like to look at, and we've certainly been interested in this area for quite a while. So particularly myself, I would like to investigate maybe some alternative market entry points. We've seen and heard quite a bit of security and safety is the main entry point into this market. But given that security and safety, well, security in particular, is probably about 20 to 25% market penetration, I'd like to investigate if there's other areas that could complement that sort of, to grow this market. You know, I want to see a much larger market for the connected home than just security. Other things, different revenue streams, and what the current roadblocks are for those particular revenue streams. A significant emphasis on non-traditional companies, you know, like some of these smaller startups that are investigating, you know, maybe there's novel strategies they're using to get into the market.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great, Jeff. Thank you very much. What? Sorry.
No, that's
okay. Good. Yeah. The steering committee members indicated at last week's, we had the vendor selection meeting, and overall the takeaways from the feedback, that the key values, and Jeff, Tracy from Schneider just elucidated on that, on those points on what they're looking at in deriving value and benefit from the study. Overall, I guess from the 30,000-foot level, Many of the steering committee members thought that investigating the value chain and where it is now, the entry points, and how it may evolve for products and services in the future, and to Jeff's point, accounting for smaller companies and disruptions, and how it may affect the value chain moving forward, and investigating the obstacles and opportunities we have during that evolution of the value chain and what will create value for your organization. So we're basically taking a look, like a key point in there was how it may evolve, and a key part of that was an understanding of consumer needs and how they define value to develop new monetization models moving forward. So it's kind of a 360 view that we're looking at, and that's a lot of the feedback that we got from the steering committee members, and we do appreciate that. Can we go to the next slide, Lisa? Thank you. As you can see, the study sponsorship opportunities involve 3 levels for this landmark research. That's the Ruby sponsorship. You see, that includes a featured case study in the research report. You're on the study steering committee. Actively participate in study scope and definition and instrument and methodology design with other steering committee members and with IHS. The Emerald sponsorship is also at the steering committee level, and as well they define the study scope, instruments, methodology, get regular input, and are there for study presentations and final report. Our diamond sponsors basically pre-buy the report of the presentations and final reports because we have an embargo period of 4 months on the study, so we'd like to give everyone a head start in using the research. And for those who can't come on the steering committee, we have that option, basically, that allows the diamond sponsor to come on and have a 4-month head start during the embargo period. So it's only available to sponsors. We release the executive summaries through the CABA Research Library, but not the full report. We'd also like to note that in addition to the study sponsorship, study sponsors may add either additional questions or sections of questions for proprietary use. If we haven't taken a deep dive on something that they really need to know, and they want to take a deeper dive. And we've done this before on previous studies. It's been used or shared with the project study sponsors, or it can be kept proprietary with for your own organization's use. So we work in conjunction with IMS or IHS Research to do that, to set up proprietary questions or sections or a bank of proprietary questions, and that can be, priced separately or in addition to. The study research prospectus at this point can be found on the CABA website if you don't have it already. And the link to today's webinar presentation we're recording will both, we will have the presentation and have the recording of the presentation. It's going to be posted at that link, Connected Home Monetization Research Projects. However, we will be getting out to everyone who's at today's meeting, and we will be sending you the link under separate cover when we have it posted. So finally, should you wish to participate in the monetization modeling of connected homes landmark research, you can contact me, John Hall, at CABA, or you can contact George Grimes, our CABA Business Development Manager at CABA. Okay. So I guess we're going to open up the floor now for questions and answers to IMS Research for the proposal presentation. So back to Lisa.
Thanks, Don. So if anybody has any questions at all, please ask me. You may have to hit *6 just to unmute your line, and then I'll be happy to take any questions.
Oh, it's #6, isn't it?
Sorry, #6. Or both are the same, depending on your phone type. So
right.
pound or *6. Okay. Any questions at all?
Hello?
Yeah. Hello? Yeah,
Hi,
go ahead.
John. Hi, John.
Yes.
This is Winston Wong from Bosch. How are you?
Good, Winston. How are you? Good.
I'm very well, thank you. I understand that this research will focus on North American market, but will at least some comparisons be made, or at least relative to other rest of the world regions where connected homes and monetization is occurring, or is fast moving?
So, I mean, in the context of sorry, John, would you like to take that one?
No, go ahead,
Okay.
Lisa.
Or Lisa.
Thank you. Hello.
Yeah.
So within the context of this study, it was decided by the project steering committee that they did want to focus specifically on the North American market. I think, John mentioned to me he was faced with a situation where, if we looked into this level of detail right the way across different geographic markets, then all of a sudden I think the project scope expands beyond, what we had planned for this. Having said that, I mean, as a research company, we do have extensive research at looking at some of the markets where we're currently seeing, a lot of movement in today, and also looking at potential markets in the future. So it's something, probably more so that we would cover as a separate project, or even just a separate, offline call where we'd be able to highlight some of the key differences between what we see in different areas. But predominantly the focus of this study will be on the North American market.
Okay. Yeah. We do have some secondary research on that, though, too, don't we, Lisa?
Yes. So I mean, we've got
for modeling.
Yeah.
For modeling purposes, right?
We do. We've got.
Yeah.
We've got a consumer survey which covers Germany, the UK, China, and Brazil, as well as the US. So I mean, internally, we've got good comparisons of how differences. How we see the differences across some of those different regional markets that we see emerging today. So we do have that for the purposes of modelling, and maybe if it's something a key requirement of our steering committee, then perhaps we can include just some more anecdotal comparisons against some of our in-house research, but we wouldn't be looking to provide sort of the full set.
That's true, because Lisa and I were discussing the project scope. And the focus of the research, like in-depth and deep dive, will be North American value chain at this point and consumer. But any information that IHS has in terms of putting together the value chain model or assisting with the background for the consumer survey will certainly be taken into consideration, right?
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Does anyone have any observations on the Now, we had Grant Kreger earlier, so. Does anyone have any observations on the study plan or the scope or the objectives that were...
John?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Armin Mashanian from Cannected. How are you?
I recognize you anywhere, Armin. Okay.
Quick question, Lisa. You're going to survey 1,000 folks over the web. How are you going to recruit these 1,000 folks?
Okay. Thanks for the question, Armin. So what we're planning to do is we are, as you mentioned, using a web-based survey, and we're currently thinking that we probably will not have a massive range of different pre-sampling criteria. We're expecting that we will exclude people under 16 from the survey because they're not expected to have as much of an impact on the purchasing decision, although I think that is debatable if anybody's been pestered by a teenage children to purchase specific things. So we will be deciding that in conjunction with the project steering committee whether or not they do want us to exclude under 16s or not. Other than that, because we're really aiming to look at the mass market, we will be planning to focus on achieving a good spread across different age groups, across different income levels, etc., to make sure that when we come to the demographic sections, we do have sufficient people to enable us to perform some segmentation by those different demographic criteria. And in terms of actually recruiting people to the sample, for our consumer surveys, we work with a specific survey organization who maintains a broad range of different participants, which they are responsible for recruiting into the survey and for rewarding participants as such. So they have a loyalty system whereby people that participate in the different types of surveys can receive these bonus points, which can ultimately be used to buy things based on this social media platform that they use. Within that, they've got a number of checks just to make sure that they're still getting a high quality, so they don't take sort of career form fillers, so people can only participate in a certain number of surveys per time period, and equally they will over recruit for each of our surveys. And then in the data cleaning phase, what they'll do is they will, if people have answered a question too quickly, or if everybody just hit option A throughout the whole thing, or things like that, then those are automatically removed from our survey. So we're quite comfortable that this company that we work with does provide us with a good range of different sample data, and we've got various benchmarking processes that we use to select companies when we want to work with them in that way.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Does anybody else have any?
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. One more. If there are no more questions at this point, we'd like to thank everybody who came on the call today, and remind you to get in touch with either George or myself at CABA if you have interest in the project or would like further explanation. We'd like to remind everyone as well that we will have the webinar recording, and we will have the presentation up to the CABA website very soon, and we will be in touch with everyone. Thank you for coming out and attending today's webinar. We would particularly like to thank IHS, IMS Research, and Lisa Aerosmith and her team for providing the facilities and the background and the presentation for this afternoon. So we'd like to adjourn the meeting at this point, and everyone have a good day and a good afternoon. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.